Hi, I'm Alex here at the Boone County Nature Center, here for your virtual field trip. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about decomposers. So, have you ever been to the park and seen some ants crawling around on an old piece of food? What about seeing some worms squirming around on the ground after it rains really hard? Do any of you eat mushrooms? I know, mushrooms are kind of gross, but I love mushrooms and they play a really important role in our ecosystem. So what do all of these things have in common? They're all decomposers. So decomposers are one of the three main parts of the food web. So the food web consists of producers. Producers are the animals and organisms that can make their own food using photosynthesis, which is a really big science word, which just means making your energy and food from sunlight. When we think of producers, we usually think of things like trees, flowers, grass, all of that green stuff that you see outside in the spring. We've also got consumers as part of the food web. Consumers are the organisms that can't make their own food. And because of that, they have to eat producers, decomposers, and other consumers to get their energy. When we think of consumers, we usually think of animals. Things like this bird, this little cardinal up here, things like snakes, some lions, deer, insects, all those kinds of things. One really interesting fact about insects is that insects can be consumers or they can be decomposers. They can play both roles. So the third part, and the part we're going to be focusing on most today, is decomposers. So what does it mean to decompose? Well, really simply, to decompose just means to break down into smaller pieces. So a decomposer is an organism that breaks things down into smaller pieces. So what are these things that decomposers break down? Well, this stuff is dead organic material called detritus. So this can be pretty much anything that you can kind of see here. It can be these leaves that have fallen on the ground. It can be these logs that have fallen over and have started to rot. It can be old food. It can be dead animals and dead plants. It can even be poop. So how does this work? How do these decomposers actually break down this detritus? Well, there's a couple main ways that they can do it. One of the ways that they can do it is by using a chemical called an enzyme. This enzyme is released and then they're able to go out and actually break down all of this detritus. So something that uses enzymes are fungus. So fungus use those enzymes to break down detritus. We've got a couple different kinds of fungi here. This is called a shelf fungus. And this shelf fungus can be found on trees. Usually if you just go on a nature hike and you look up and look around, you can probably see it growing on the side of trees. This is called a turkey tail fungus. And although it's not as colorful right now, when it is alive, all of these edges and some of the veins in the middle can have really fun, cool coloration, and it looks a lot like a turkey tail, like you might see on Thanksgiving. A really interesting thing about turkey tail fungus, and some other fungi as well, is that they can be used in medicine. This doesn't mean that you should go out and take a big bite of a fungus or a turkey tail fungus or something like that, but it does make them really important, and it's just one of the many reasons why these fungi should be conserved. So another really interesting way that decomposers break down detritus is by actually eating it and digesting it. So I'm going to show you a couple examples of different organisms that do that. So we've got a whole box full of different decomposers here. So one of the decomposers that actually has to eat its food and eat the detritus, if I can get him out, is this beetle. So this is one of the types of animals that you might see, one of the types of organisms that you might see when you get to do your decomposer activity later. He's running into a centipede, which is not technically a decomposer. He's a predatory animal, and they can be found near decomposers because they share that same habitat. That leaf litter and those logs make for a really safe place to live. These types of creatures, which spiders, centipedes, all those kinds of predatory animals, also will eat the decomposers. This guy here is a millipede, and you can see he got scared a little bit. He kind of rolled up. But millipedes also have to eat the detritus to break it down. So millipedes and centipedes, he really wants to fall off my hand. One of the ways you can tell them apart is that millipedes, let me grab this guy again. He's a really good example because he's so big. You can see that each of his body parts, you can see them really clearly, has 2 legs. Centipedes only have 1 leg per body segment. So millipedes have 2, centipedes have 1. Also, when millipedes get scared, which this guy kind of did, they'll roll up. Let's see if I can get him to do it. He's pretty comfortable now. But one of the things that they'll do is they'll curl up into a ball. Yeah, that's a good example. This guy over here, he's a little scared. They'll curl up into a ball to protect themselves. Centipedes will just run away. So then, we have another really interesting type of organism here that's called a lichen. It's not technically a decomposer. It really only breaks down rock, but it's still really interesting because it's a good example of a symbiotic relationship, which means 2 or more organisms living and working together. So lichen are composed of a fungus and then another organism called either an algae or a really special type of bacteria. And this is cool because the fungus is a really strong, sturdy organism. So it gives the algae or that bacteria a safe place to live. And then in turn, the bacteria or that algae can photosynthesize, which we talked about means making food from sunlight. And the fungus can use that food too. So the fungus gets food from the algae gets a really safe place to live. So where can we find all of these decomposers that we've talked about? And we're going to go over a couple more that we can find here for the activity. Well, we live in a really cool place called a temperate forest where we can find these decomposers all over. So you can find decomposers by going up to any of these logs that you see and gently flipping it over. You might find some under that. You can move these leaves around very gently to find some decomposers under that. You might find some fungus in a really wet area of the forest. Sometimes, if you live in an area where there's not a lot of trees, you can also go and you can find some decomposers near a dumpster or any place where there's a lot of old food left out. Just make sure you're with your parent or guardian when you do that. We don't want you wandering off to find a dumpster by yourself. So we talked a little bit about the food web, the ways that decomposers can break down detritus, types of decomposers, and where we can find them. But why are decomposers so important? There's a couple big reasons why. One of the reasons is that decomposers get rid of all of this dead stuff and everything that falls onto the ground in the world. Decomposers keep our world clean. Without decomposers, all of these leaves would be here for forever, all of these fallen logs, dead animals, dead plants. We might even be able to still find some dead dinosaurs laying around. And could you imagine how much dog poop would be left if we didn't have decomposers to break it down? That'd be pretty gross. I'm happy that decomposers are here. But another big reason, and probably the most important, is that decomposers keep nutrients flowing through the food web. So if we go back to this food web diagram, you can see here that producers and consumers give decomposers organic waste, that detritus, that decomposers then break down and they return the nutrients to the soil, and producers and consumers use those nutrients to continue to live and grow and survive. So without decomposers, the world would look a lot different. It'd definitely be a lot dirtier, and we probably wouldn't be able to live like we do now. So they're super important. So now, it's your turn to go out and find some decomposers. You'll need either this worksheet, your rotten log worksheet, Or you can just take a piece of paper and a pen if you can't print it off and go out into nature. Find a tree, find some fallen leaves or a flower bed, or maybe that dumpster if your parents or guardian want to let you near that dumpster. And see if you can find some of these decomposers that we talked about, and even some of the ones we didn't. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to very gently go up to a log, and you'll want to flip it over. And you can see down there we've got a centipede, we've got a millipede, we've got a snail. So you might find some really cool stuff under that log. You can also very gently move that leaf litter away. And there's a beetle and there's another millipede. And you want to be gentle, otherwise you'll scare all those critters away. And you can also go to your flower bed, maybe dig around a little bit. And when you're done, make sure you put the leaves in the log back, because you wouldn't want someone to flip your house upside down and then just leave it. On that sheet, make sure you take a couple observations, write down some of the things that you find, where you find them, and when you're done, take a picture of it and upload it to Google Classroom so you can get credit for this activity. So thank you for joining me. I hope you learned a little bit and had a good time, and I hope to see you outside next year. And remember, nature's really neat.